That I would like to introduce tonight's august speaker. We are so privileged to have with us tonight Father Ghevond AJAMIAN, who is known, I'm sure, to most, if not all of us here. He is the pastor of St. Sarkis Church in Dallas, Texas. He grew up in St. Leon's in Fair Lawn, New Jersey, and is a graduate of St. Nerses and St. Vladimir seminaries. He also studied in Armenia and Jerusalem, and actually met his wonderful Yeretzkin while studying in Armenia. This past April, his community celebrated a major milestone with the consecration of their new church, which has won the U.S. Building of the Year 2022 award by World Architect magazine. If you have not yet seen photographs or not yet had a chance to visit, you are all highly encouraged to do so. And St. Sarkis Dallas also hosted Sports Weekend last May, and will be hosting this year's Clergy Conference and Diocesan Assembly. He, with his wife Yeretzkin Hasmig and their daughter Sirpuhi, have ministered to the Armenian community of North Texas since 2011. And tonight, Derhair will be engaging with us on the topic of stewardship. So with that, I invite you, Ghevond, to take it away.
Thank you so much. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one true God, amen. Wisdom of the Father, O Jesus, grant to us wisdom, that we may each think, speak, and do that which is good in your sight. Save us from all evil and distracting thoughts, words, and deeds, and have mercy upon your creatures and upon each of us great sinners that we are. Amen. Stewardship, a way of life. Okay. So I took a course a year and a half ago, offered by actually sponsored by the Greek Archdiocese, and it was on stewardship. And during this course, I learned many things about stewardship. In particular, stewardship is an invitation to participate. It's not just raising money, which many of us think it is, myself included at the time. Stewardship is a part of ownership and also responsibility. And it's also an opportunity to share our blessings. And so in tonight's presentation, we're going to see how we can use our ways of stewardship, the different types of stewardship that exist, to help others, but at the same time, to help us in the future. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. So first, let's see here. What we usually think stewardship is. If you are Armenian and you're from overseas, the Armenian word for steward is usually dendes, and usually we think of someone who cleans a building or is a caretaker. Stewardship in English, usually we think of stewards, whether they be on airplanes or in other areas of life, but somebody who helps or teaches us how to do something. Stewards, like a flight attendant. But in reality, a steward is something completely different. The word steward in English, as many of you know, I love etymology, and so the word steward in English comes from two old English words. The word sty, means house. This is where we get the phrase pig-sty, right? It means pig's house. And ward or warden, one who watches over something. So a steward, a steward, is the warden of the house, or one who looks after the house or the home. In Armenian, it's the same idea. The word dendes comes from dun, which means home or house, and desnel, to see, right? So one who sees or oversees a home or a house. And this is the exact word that's used in this Sunday's gospel reading, this coming Sunday, and the gospel reading we're going to discuss this evening too. But where does stewardship come from? So in the Old Testament, we hear of stewardship, but it's usually referred to as tithing. And we sometimes hear this today too, tithing. The Armenian church, unfortunately, I'll say, is not very well educated in tithing. Many of our Protestant brothers and sisters in those churches are very big into tithing. And tithing is just an old English word that means tenth, 10%, tenth. So this idea of giving 10% of what you have. But in the Old Testament, there's actually many, many different types of tithing. The first main one is the annual tithe that was given to the Levites. And you can find this, I put the Bible verses if you want to look them up later on. But this was a 10% of your crops and your produce every year that went to the Levites, the priestly class. Another tithe was another annual tithe, and this was done every year for the feast in Jerusalem. There was also what's called a triannual tithe, and this was done collected once every 3 years for aliens, right, foreigners, orphans, and widows. And not to mention, and then also just these 3 tithes alone, right, under the law, is not 10%, but actually 23% of your income. In addition to this, the Israelites could give free will offerings that were above and beyond these tithes, and these could just be in general. And we read about these in Exodus, Deuteronomy, and Malachi. So in the Old Testament, giving, tithing, right, stewardship is very prevalent. When we talk about it in the Christian sense or in the New Testament, the one that always comes up is the widow's mite, right? And we know this example, we've heard this story, how there's an old widow, Christ is sitting with his disciples in the temple, and he sees all these rich people giving all their exorbitant amounts of money out of their excess, out of their abundance, jewels and large amounts of money to the temple. And then this one widow comes and gives her 2 pennies, right? 2 luma, we might call it, or 2 kopek. And so she gives this. And what's interesting is, and he says that this widow gave more than all of the riches that the wealthy had given already, because they gave out of their abundance, but she gave her entire livelihood, right? So it's not so much giving what is extra, right? But it's giving everything. So it's not just 10%, not 23%, it's not 50%, right? St. John Chrysostom talks about this with the widow and says she could have given 1 penny and kept the other, but she gave all of it. She gave 100% of it. So the question really becomes now, as we are entering into Lent, and this coming Sunday is the Sunday of the Steward, the Unjust Steward. The question really becomes, what is stewardship? And does it only revolve around money? And to find that answer, we read in the gospel reading for this Sunday. So the gospel reading, there it is. The gospel reading for this Sunday is from the Gospel of Luke, right? And this is probably the hardest gospel reading for priests to preach about because it's so contradictory, and to the point where most priests, myself included, try not to discuss this parable. We always go to a different parable in the gospel reading because this Sunday's gospel reading is all of chapter 16. So we usually do a different part of it, and we usually skip over this because it's so difficult. But it's actually at the heart of what stewardship is and the heart of what Christianity is. So let's read. He also said to his disciples, there was a rich man who had a steward, and charges were brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. And he called him and he said to him, what is this that I hear about you? Turn in the account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward. And the steward said to himself, what shall I do, since my master is taking the stewardship away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do, so that people may receive me into their houses when I am put out of the stewardship. So summoning the master's debtors one by one, he said to the first, how much do you owe my master? He said, 100 measures of oil. And he said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. And he said to another, and how much do you owe? He said, 100 measures of wheat. He said to him, take your bill. The master commended the dishonest steward for his shrewdness, for the sons of this world with their own generation. I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of unrighteous mammon, so that when it fails, they may receive you into the eternal habitations. So when we read this, it sounds a little strange, because the question then begins or comes up. So are we supposed to steal? Is he saying, I want you to go and steal? Well, the answer is yes, no, and sort of. Okay. He does not want you to go steal from people. All right. So don't do that. But at first, to answer this question, the answer is he goes into this and he explains it this way. If the dishonest, unjust, and worldly people of this world, right, as he refers to as the sons of this world, if they know how to prepare for their future, then likewise the honest, the just Christians, known as the sons of light, he refers to them as sons of light in the gospel, then they should also spend time on preparing for their future. If we think about it, from our graduations from high school, and maybe even before that, it is drilled into us by our parents, by our teachers, by our workplaces, by the world all around us. It's drilled into us about preparing for our future, preparing for retirement, for home, for health, for our family, for traveling, all of these things. It's drilled into us to prepare for the future. You need to open up a retirement fund. You need a 401k. You need to invest. You need to do this constantly so that when the day comes that we need to retire and we can't work anymore, we have something to support us. Okay? And so Christ is saying here that the sons of this world, people, prepare for this. They know that this is going to happen, and we prepare for it. Sons of light, Christians, often don't worry enough and prepare enough about our afterlife, preparing for heaven. So Christ is saying, you need to steal, you do need to cheat, but not in the way that we are thinking. Again, he is not saying go and rob a church so that you can prepare for heaven. That's not what he's saying at all. In fact, the answer to this question of how we do this is fleshed out in the remainder of the gospel reading, which we're going to go into. But he says, by stealing money, by stealing goods of our master, who is our Lord Christ, right? Just as the unjust steward stole from his master and prepared for his future, likewise, as Christians, we are supposed to steal from God, steal from the master, and prepare for our life, heaven, that is. So the question naturally arises, how do we steal from God? Again, do not go robbing priests this coming Sunday. Do not go to the church and try and rob the church. That's not what he's saying. The things that belong to God are the blessings that each of us have in this world. Okay? Everything we have belongs to God. Everything that has been given to us belongs to God. It's not ours. We are stewards of those things that have been given to us. And as such, we are supposed to watch over them and manage them. But at the same time, we're supposed to use those things, these blessings, for helping other people. We use them to help others. We take the things that God has given to us, the things that actually belong to God, and use them for God by helping other people. it becomes more clear in this part of the gospel reading. So this is the second half of the gospel reading. All right. The rich man and Lazarus. He says, there was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, full of sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, the dogs came and licked his sores. He died and was carried by the angel. The rich man also died and was buried, and in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham in his bosom. And he called out, Father Abraham, have mercy upon me, and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame. But Abraham said, Son, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you is a great chasm. A great chasm has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us. And he said, Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment. But Abraham said, They have Moses and the prophets, let them hear them. And he said, No, Father Abraham. But if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent. And he said to him, If you do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead. So here we see the rich man not use the resources, master's money, for the betterment of mankind. He does not help those who are in need. He does not use those things that belong to God for helping other people. He did not build up a place in heaven for himself, but rather he used his blessings on himself, and after he died, it was too late. And then he also goes on to say that he wants someone from the dead to come back and tell his brothers. Now, because they won't listen to the prophets, so maybe if they see someone rise from the dead, they'll believe him. And naturally, this parable speaks about Christ, right? If they don't listen to Moses and the prophets, they're not going to listen to someone who rises from the dead either. So again, here we see this man did not use the goods, the resources, the money of his master, God, to help those in need. So the question then becomes, how can this be done? How do we use the resources that are God's for helping other people? And if you haven't figured out by now, it's through stewardship. Okay? So the understanding of Christian stewardship, though, is not, we've heard it, but we have to fully understand it. All right? In the ancient world, and even in today, things are composed of other things, smaller things, right? In science classes, we learn that everything in this world is made. So in the ancient world, they believed that the entire universe was created or composed of fire, air, water, and earth, all right? Humans in the ancient world also were believed to be composed of 3 things: body, soul, or spirit, and mind, right? And even to this day, we have this idea, this concept. If you don't have a body, but you have a soul and a mind, well, you're not human. You're an angel or a demon, right? If you have a body and a mind, but no soul, right? We call you inhuman. You're not human, you're inhuman. If you don't have a soul and you're just a body and a mind and you have no spirit in you, then you're not human. And if you have a body and a soul, but your mind is gone. You're no longer there. It's very hard to consider that person a human being. They may be a human, but they're not a human as we would think, because they're not functioning anymore. They're just there. But then for stewardship, also it composes of three things. And I'm sure all of you have heard this: time, talent, and treasure, right? This is what stewardship is. It's not just treasure. It's not just money. It's not just volunteering. It's not just your talents. It's all three of these things combined. And if we are able to use all three of these things, then true Christian stewardship takes place. So time, right? We imagine or we want time to be like this. We don't want time to go. We want it to stay still. But in reality, we all know that time is this. Time is going away. It's passing by. And for that reason, we are very frugal and very defensive of our time, right? We don't like to waste our time. And the Bible teaches us this too. A couple of tenets that the Bible teaches us about time is life is brief and we cannot be presumptuous about the future. All of us, unfortunately, know someone who one day they're here and the next day or the next week they're gone. They passed away without warning. Unfortunately, this happens. So we have no guarantee of the future. We also know that the eternal gives meaning to the temporal. That is to say, those things that exist today, our lives today, are made meaningful in knowing that the future is eternal, that there is something beyond this, right? St. Paul writes about this, and he says, if Christ is not risen from the dead, then all of this that we're doing is for nothing. It's all in vain. So the eternal gives meaning to the temporal. Like all other assets that we have, our time is owned by God. It does not belong to us. All right. We make comments and we make statements of saying, my time is precious. I can give you some of my time, right? But in reality, time belongs to God. This is one of those resources, one of those pieces of resources that God has, money, right? That God has that we are able to steal for other people. And we're going to go into that in a moment. We must be sensitive to opportunities so that we can make the most of them, right? So we can't just do anything and everything people ask us to do or is available for us to do. We have to take into consideration what is available, what opportunities there are, and make the most of them. And then finally, our use of time will reflect our priorities, right? You know how much someone cares about someone or something by the amount of time they dedicate to it. And priests know this. I'm giving you a secret. There's a pearl of wisdom to all of you. If you do not participate in the church, but you go to church once or twice a year and you tell your derheid or your haisud, I love the church, I love God, I pray every day, I do all of these things, but you do not really prioritize those things. Priests notice. We may not go out on it, we may not say it, but all of us know who is involved in the church. And because our time reflects our priorities. And God also sees this. He sees where we are in our life and what we dedicate our time to. And that tells him where our priorities are. Are your priorities dedicated to worshiping God, evangelizing, and bringing people to Christ? Or are your priorities dedicated to preparing for your retirement fund, traveling the world, and making sure that people see and know who you are? These are all things we have to keep in mind. So time is one way or one thing we can use that belongs to God that we can dedicate and steal and give to other people. Talent is the next one, right? Talent requires time, but it also requires at times sacrificing treasure, because we use our time, we use our talent as usually ways to make money, right? If we are in marketing, we can use our marketing skills and not charge the church or charge someone for using those skills. If we're a carpenter, we can use our skills, our talents to help build something for the church or for the community or for someone else, charging them, right? If we're a lawyer, we can use our time to help someone, give them legal advice without charging. And there are many different ways to give and use our talent, right? We can sweep, right? We can sing and cook at a cookout, right? We can move tables in the church. We can clean the floors. We can visit people. We can call people. Some of us are great and talented at interacting and speaking with people. Other people do not have that talent. I know that. Some people are not good with others and they don't work well with others, but they have other talents. All of these talents, which are not ours, remember that, our talents belong to God. And since they belong to God, we can use them, again, steal them, and give them back to people in order to prepare for our afterlife, to prepare for heaven. And the last way is through treasure. And this is what everyone thinks about when we think about and hear stewardship, right? It helps, naturally, it helps pay the bills. It helps keep the church in budget, right? A form of tithing is just a way of giving something back to God, right? We hear this often, this phrase, tithing or dedicating or donating treasure, money, is giving back to God. Well, you can't give something back to someone that hasn't already been given to you, right? That idea of giving back means it was already given to you. And so, like the unjust steward, the shrewd steward, we are using that which is God's, our money, right? Hopefully to help others, not just to prepare for our earthly life, but also to prepare for the heavenly life to come. In a sense, we can think about it as we prepare for our earthly retirement here. Some of you are already in retirement, right? But we also have to prepare for our spiritual retirement. So in reality, stewardship, it's an invitation, right? It's not a command, right? Nowhere does it say you have to do this, but it's an invitation to us to participate in the mission of the church and to participate in the teachings of Christ. And in doing so, right, in answering that invitation to stewardship, we are preparing for our future, our spiritual retirement. Just like they teach us, and as I said earlier, they teach us from a very young age that you need to prepare for your retirement, right? And what do they say? If you're young, or even if you're older, I should say, sorry, even if you're older, they say you don't have to worry, you don't have to put in huge amounts of money to prepare for retirement. They say little amounts is okay, but it has to be consistent, even with a little, because over time, that will grow. Your stewardship, right? Or I should start off, your retirement fund will grow if you constantly put little bit in all the time. Likewise, our stewardship or our spiritual retirement grow also, but we have to constantly do it. One perfect example from the Gospels is the feeding of the 5,000, right? And we know this story. It's the only gospel, it's the only miracle that takes place in all four Gospels, right? Not walking on water, not raising the dead, not healing the lepers, not casting out demons, right? These are found in the different Gospels, maybe in 1, 2, or 3 of them, but the only one that's found in all four Gospels is the feeding of the 5,000. And then the question naturally arises, why? Why would Christ, or why would the apostles, right, the evangelists, say this is so important that everyone needs this? I mean, one reason for this is it's the only thing we can all relate to, right? All of us can relate to hunger, whether you're 2 hours old or 102 years old. We all know what hunger is, and we all know what that pain feels like, right? We don't all know what it is like to lose a child, or to be in a storm in a boat, or to be blind or to be deaf. We don't understand these things. We don't know how to relate to these necessarily, but we all know what it means to be hungry, right? But at the same time, this is also an invitation. This is an invitation to stewardship, the feeding of the 5,000. Because when they say to him, when the apostle or the disciples come to Christ and they say, there's no food, these people are hungry, send them home, send them to the villages to go and eat because it's late. Christ makes an invitation. He says, you give them something to eat. He invites the disciples to give them something. And they don't have anything. In fact, one of the Gospels says there's only one boy, little boy, who has 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, right? And Christ takes it, he blesses it, he breaks it, and he divides it, and it multiplies to be able to feed 5,000. Likewise, I'm going to go into our retirement funds real quick. You put a little bit of money in, and over time, it will multiply. It will take time, but it will multiply and become a huge amount of money. Likewise, the very little that we have to offer to Christ, to offer to our fellow humans, our fellow man, whatever it may be, as little as it may be, Christ will take that and will multiply it. He'll multiply it and it will be able to help hundreds and thousands and maybe even more. So to be able to say, or for someone to say, I don't have anything to give, I have no talent, I have no time, I have no treasure, I can't do any of that. We go back to what Christ said in the gospel reading for this Sunday, where he says very specifically, the sons of this world prepare for their future. If only the sons of light would do that too, right? If the people of this world are able to prepare for their future in this world, we as Christians should be even more willing and ready to prepare for our future in the afterlife. Saint John Chrysostom of the 4th century says very specifically, a rich man is not one who has much, but one who gives much. For what he gives away remains. We may say, oh, this is all I have, this is what I need. But if he gives it away, Christ will bless it and multiply it and give it back even more, right? We see this with the widow. She had only 2 pennies and she gave it all. So hopefully, if we are able to do these things and live a steward-filled life, we'll be able to hear what Christ says at the end. He says, well done, good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of your Lord, right? But the only way we'll be able to hear this is by making stewardship a way of life. It's not just something done on Sundays. It's not something done once a year during Lent. It's not done only when we feel moved to, because somebody is guilting us into doing something. Stewardship needs to be something that is constant, always, and continuous throughout our lives. And it has to become a way of life, not just, as I said, something we just do once in a while.